mood to pod today. Maybe, I don't know. Do you have a topic that's going to uplift the spirit?
I've been wanting to talk about this. But anyways, I'm Miriam Tamar.
And GNL Zamba.
And we are Nsimbi.
Nsimbi. NSIMBI. Follow, subscribe, do all of those things.
But anyways, as I was saying, I want to just get right in. I've been seeing different articles on different news sources and different video clips about this. There's been a big movement of like European museums that have African art that are now trying to return certain pieces, or different countries are requesting pieces be returned to them. And
please go on.
Yeah. And yeah, this is essentially stolen art that was, part of colonizing a people. And what do you call it when you there's a term
when
for
you take something that doesn't belong to you?
No, but pillaging.
Stealing.
I was thinking of pillaging. That's the old school. So these things definitely need to be returned. But then, it's not so much that I want to talk about that because that's obvious to me.
Before we assume that the art that ends up in Europe is stolen,
I think they have documentation.
What informs this belief?
I think there's documentation of things that were given as gifts. But I think they also could identify, there are certain pieces that could be identified that were definitely stolen because of the meaning that the piece had to a society. It would be something that would never be given away. It wouldn't make sense. It could be something that was protecting your village or I don't know. There were things that I saw something really interesting about it. I'm trying to think, what's the writer of Americana?
The author.
Yeah.
Ngozi Chimamanda
I saw her.
Adichie,
So she did an interesting talk. So you guys can Google the internets for that. But for me, it was more making me think about the whole mindset of what is giving back. And then I was thinking of that, that's sort of a form of reparations.
Yeah.
Returning a stolen thing. I mean, it doesn't return the damages that you've done. But then I just got to thinking the whole nonprofit world, which is seen as doing good, out of our hearts, and U.S. is donating this money.
No. We're talking about art. Are we still talking about the art? Because
if you want to talk about the art,
what you're talking about are two conversations.
Okay, well, the art led me to that thought.
Okay, so we're looking at art that was moved from places, not Africa alone, because France and the United Kingdom did not only colonize Africa.
Yeah.
So they have Indian art.
I'm sure.
Basically,
they have global art.
They have global art, basically.
Stolen art from all over. I don't know.
Yeah. And in the conversation of art, I know there are so many art lovers, and we love art. And with more money, I'd like to collect more art and buy more art because it's enjoyable to look at, and it
more
also...
More money, more art.
More money, more art. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, but the conversation that you're starting with is a very interesting one because most of the museums in Europe have a lot of West African art, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to rightfully assume that most of this art that's in these museums was not given as a gift.
Right.
Because when you have a statue from Benin, which the locals believed possessed the spirit to protect the village. I don't think anybody gives that away freely.
Yeah, so that's the thing. There's so much of West African art is holding people's spirits. It could be protecting a village. It could be someone's burial. It could be, so it's you don't give away. That's like digging up a grave.
Yeah.
And giving... people don't do that. I also want to say in terms of public relations between Europe and any of these countries, I think they weren't I don't think people were going out of their way to hand over and give as gifts many precious items.
Well, I would like to say that historically speaking, Europeans were the first grave diggers. And
what does that mean?
Digging graves, I'm talking about where your greed, yes, thank you. Okay. Where your greed overtakes you and you pillage a tomb. You disturb the dead
Yeah,
and
I've
take
gone
away
to see.
their possessions.
Yeah, I've seen so many Egyptian like sarcophagus and what's in
Yes,
it. Yeah,
in museums and,
so
you know,
is that
and
right?
people's
I don't
homes,
know.
people collecting like all of this art, which actually belongs to a people, and it's those people's history.
Yes.
But because Europe had this thing, this imperialist view of the world and of superiority, that nothing that was sacred to a people was out of bounds, that couldn't be touched by them, basically. So whether it was a tomb, a pyramid, a sarcophagus, whether it was a statue, whether it was a spear that has been used for years in coronation, whether it was a beautiful vase, whether it was something that was in a family for so long, they wanted to take it to Europe, reward it to their king and queen as a present, or as keep it in their houses for decoration, or something they would brag to their friends about in a mansion or castle. So that's how most of the art ends up there, right? And right now we're having a very, very uncomfortable conversation. And the conversation is uncomfortable for the Europeans. Because even as the Africans say that you people claim to be so liberal and respect human rights and the rights to... You claim to put on this air of being fair, yet you're holding all of these things.
You're organizing the United Nations and all these different places that are supposed to create accountability and global systems of justice.
Yes. So the conversation now begins becoming... When are you returning the art that you stole? Because most of the museums that hold these arts are very liberal places, or places where libertarians like go and, you know, feast their soul on the arts. Basically, the liberals have always they have always championed the arts and you know, like put money aside.
I don't know that it's I think people from all backgrounds like
people
art.
From all
so
backgrounds. Even Hitler stole art, by the way.
Well, that's what I was actually going to say, that Jewish art was stolen during the Holocaust, and there's an ongoing effort to return stolen pieces as they're discovered.
They did not only steal gold, they stole the art as well.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same air of like, I'm superior to you, so I can destroy you as a people and even take what belongs to you because I believe it's rightfully mine. It's from that mindset. So from what I've heard from people of West Africa and East Africa, South Africa, wherever this art is found, whenever they write to the museums and say, we rightfully, our people have a right to this art and you did not get it in the right way. And
then they say, we would return it, but
you guys wouldn't take care of it.
You don't know how to take care of your art.
The statement alone. It's
like if the art was made there and lasted for however long it lasted.
For however long it lasted. Yeah. The people know how to take care of their own art.
And you don't have a right to tell someone how to keep their own belongings. Like if I want to keep my furniture in a certain way, if I want to keep my plants in a certain way, like it's my neighbor. It's just not your business.
Exactly. So it's another way of trying to look down on Africans, that they can't take down care of their art. It's another way of looking down at the Indians and saying you can't take care of all the things that we've stolen from you.
Yeah.
From what I've found, I don't want to paint a picture that all Europeans are evil, but wherever European power has showed up in the world, right?
Yeah.
It has been very destructive. Not only art, but every time you look at an animal in a zoo, right? Whether they'll claim educational purposes.
Are you saying that zoos were created by Europeans? I don't even know.
Most of the times, these animals were captured from the wild. A tiger.
So the first zoos you think were
a tiger has no place being in
I
London
agree with you,
zoo.
but I don't know that there wasn't a zoo in Asia before there was a zoo in Europe. Like I don't know. I'd have to Google that.
If there's a zoo in Asia, the animal is at least closer to home. It doesn't have to cross a sea.
I don't care if the animal is close to home because I think zoos are like terrible places. Unless it's like I like.
Okay. Let's first look at it. Let's first look at it.
I like animal refugee centers. Like if
where does the word zoo even come from? We have to look into this.
Zoo, I don't know.
Yeah. Zoology, you're studying whatever. It to me sounds like a European term or place that came to be represented.
I have no
It's
idea.
a concept that came to exist after Europeans took over places and wanted to feign bravery for having captured a lion.
Is this based on research, or you're just coming up with this theory?
I'm not
Should
just
I
coming
Google
off of
it?
it.
Like,
Yeah,
I don't-
Google it. Google
Okay.
it. But I'm just saying that even if the origin and the etymology of the word is not from Europe, the concept that a zoo exists or a museum
gonna see, where
exists
did-
is a very European.
Where was first zoo?
Yeah.
Let's solve this
Mm-hmm.
mystery. The first modern zoo, built
Yeah.
1793, opened in Paris, France.
Thank you very much.
The
And-
menageries of French aristocrats, including the king and queen,
Yes.
were taken by leaders of the French Revolution and relocated to the Menagerie du Jardin des Plantes. Oh, I don't even know what okay, whatever. But the
Damn, your
point.
French is good, the way you're pronouncing
Yeah.
all these things. But the point
Oh,
that-
now this is saying another one in Austria, so it is
Yeah,
sounding
but
European.
Enough. That's enough. Because we're not going to be doing our podcast off
Wait,
Wikipedia.
zoo in Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay,
But how far back is that?
In the pre-dynastic period.
Oh, okay. So the
So
okay.
I'm just saying.
But the point that I was trying to make here is that even though it was an assumption, and I didn't know that the first zoo might have been in Paris or Austria, my assumption
Or
automatically was
Egypt.
that wherever these animals were captured, it was the thing of, yeah, even if it's Egypt, it still supports the theory of I own this place, so I'm going to take away all these things
Sure.
that belong to you, and then they're going to be in my capital city. They're going to be for my visitors to come and look at. Because even when you look at Egypt has always been a center of power.
Mm-hmm.
So if an animal was captured from Asia, it's still going to end up in where the center of power is. And for long, Europe was the center of that power.
Yes.
France had a lot of power. Austria had a lot of power. The Russian Empire had a lot of power. And the most recent one, which has collapsed, is the English one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from all of those values and from all of that colonization and all of that military power, the power of conquest, also came other power. The power over the arts, the resources, and what languages are acceptable, what mannerisms are acceptable.
Right.
So wherever that manifested, it ended up robbing the colonized of their dignity, their art, their language, their history,
cultural
as well.
development.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it became a situation of people trying or being forced to adopt a foreign culture. So then the original cultures becomes lost. But I mean, I guess what we're talking about is a form of reparations. So
I love that one.
Acknowledging a group of people acknowledging they did wrong to another group of people, and now figuring out how do you repay those people. And as you're saying, art was stolen in Nazi Germany. Those pieces, whenever they're discovered, are returned to family members. Even if the original owners have passed, it goes back to the family. And then I believe there's been some form of reparations from Germany in the form of money.
Yes.
So Europe has been able to do some reparations, but this has been white on white.
I wanted to define the word reparations. So reparations, according to this, in transitional justice, they define reparations as compensation that's given for an abuse or injury.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have abused a land and the people,
so I want to say
and you have injured people, so that whatever you give is considered reparations.
Yeah, reparations can even be like in a domestic case, or any legal case, just like between two people that can happen. Like if someone feels so, but we're talking about reparations on a much larger scale of like countries, regions,
but
continents.
we've stumbled on a very, very interesting topic right now, and the bigger the bigger concept for me of reparations isn't just the art. The art is just the start of it. But the bigger part of the reparations for me is after we've recognized that most empires were built off slave labor.
Yes.
And that all of this European superiority that comes from their power of the economy.
Okay. And the slave labor starts when we look at the Egyptian Empire, the Roman Empire, those were also built off slave labor. The slaves have changed throughout history. But
yeah, the slaves have changed all through. It's wrong for people to always think of, right now, when people say slavery, they imagine it, they automatically think black people.
Yeah.
But historically, slavery was for everybody. There were 3 categories. Yeah, anybody could get it.
It was totally democratic slavery.
No,
right?
no. Anybody could get it.
Yeah,
or someone would end up being a slave.
It was
and I'm coming to
equal opportunity. That was the word I wanted.
Yes. But before the slavery we know today, before the South American slavery, before the American slavery, the slavery in these other empires was not based on color. It was actually until there was a pope called Pope Innocent.
A pope. I was like,
a pope. Actually, like, slavery and Catholicism are well linked in history.
Yeah.
And the evils between the Catholic Church and slavery are well known and are well documented all through history.
Mm-hmm.
But I was saying that before, in all of these times, a person became a slave when they borrowed money.
Yeah, when you're in debt.
And could not afford to pay back.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'd be a slave until the debt is paid back. That person basically owns you and your service. Well, that's one. Let me finish my thought.
That's an indentured servant, I think.
That's what they call them later. But again, the concept is slavery. They would shave your head in some societies, and you'd wear a separate color from the free people. You're basically moving behind, and it's
like people need to know at all times.
People need to know that you're not, your humanity has been taken away. You're being owned by somebody else. So that's one, which was debt. So the second one was war. In terms of war, you could be captured.
Yeah, prisoners of war become slaves.
Yeah, prisoners of war would become slaves. And I'm forgetting the other one. Forgetting the third.
Part of what was the word? Oh my gosh, we're having like word retrieval issues today.
Yeah. But
pillaging. You pillage and you get the slaves, you get the goods, you get everything is a commodity. Yeah.
So basically off of those 2 categories, I'm forgetting what the third was, but I read it somewhere. Off of those 2 categories, it was never about color. So in Egypt, you had the Jews as slaves, right? You had Arabs as slaves. You had black people that were slaves. You had Chinese that were slaves. Because when you look through Egypt and the hieroglyphs that they draw, they have all of these stories as well.
I do agree that there was a diverse collection of slaves in Egypt.
Yes.
I'm just trying to remember, because what I understand is at one point they just decided to take like a large community of Jews as slaves. So I don't know if that would have been a debt situation or been a war, or is it a war? So I'm trying to.
But wasn't it because how did Jews end up as slaves in Egypt? Wasn't it because of Moses? Remember the kid who was put on a basket ended up being picked up.
They were
Miriam?
already slaves. I think they blame it on Joseph. And the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Wait. Because
don't follow this podcast for correct history.
Actually, when we say something, go Google it, go dig deeper. But from what I remember loosely,
these are not facts. Okay.
From what I remember loosely, Moses is sold by his brothers, right?
No, Moses is a baby.
Who is sold by his brothers?
Joseph.
Yes. So
Joseph
is sold by his brothers.
Yes.
And he ends up actually captured, sold by his brothers. Yes. He ends up in Egypt.
Yes.
Egypt becomes closer to the Pharaoh. So their years pass and he rises to the ranks.
Yes.
But then a war breaks out and the Jews are being persecuted. So they run from their homeland.
So they're basically taken as prisoners of war.
No.
Oh, I'll keep listening then.
they ran for refuge in Egypt, only to discover that one of the most powerful men in that land was their brother that they had sold.
Okay.
So they call other people and they begin forming a community over there. Over time, the people that came to settle fleeing from war were in turn turned into slaves, because the politics changes. If Joseph is no longer in the favor of the Pharaoh and
so you're saying
basically
a group of refugees was just like, because of politics, turned into slaves.
That's how I think.
So that would be sort of a different category.
Don't quote me on this, but this is how I'm paraphrasing my.
Yeah. And
he likes to.
He's very good at telling me different Jewish history, because you have Old Testament knowledge, and you're really into Egyptian history as well.
But regardless, the Chinese did some labor for a very long time in Egypt as well.
Yeah,
it's well documented. But the point what we're trying to drive at is that before slavery was for everyone, it wasn't until a sailor, I think it was a Portuguese sailor or a Spanish sailor, that ended up picking people from West Africa. And after these people helped him out on the boat, they reached Europe and he really had no use for them. So because he couldn't feed them, he decided to gift them to the Pope or the Roman Catholic Church.
Weird.
Yes.
Okay.
So
so the church even had slaves? Like,
no, wait. This is,
my God.
Yes. But he didn't pick them up as slaves.
I understand.
But
when you gift a person, it's like.
But for some reason, maybe gifting is the wrong word. But for some reason, they end up in the hands of the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church, actually now I remember the story. The Roman Catholic Church had amassed so much power in the world that all roads were leading to Rome.
Right.
That means that all the money that was being collected even from kingdoms, the Roman Catholic Church had power even over some kings.
Yeah.
And the tithe had to be paid, and that tithe ended up always in Rome.
Right.
So because the church had all of this wealth, and what do navigators need when they're going for journeys? They need someone to sponsor the journey, to sponsor the expedition. So the Roman Catholic Church was doing a little bit of that too. So when he couldn't support his crew, he had to leave it behind in Rome, under the care of a pope.
Okay.
So the Roman Catholic Church by then used to use Indians as slaves.
Okay.
But then they saw that the work ethic, this is wrong. This is totally bad. But they saw that the Africans were actually stronger, right? And could even work longer. And they could knock out tasks with ease, which is wrong. It's a gift, but then looked at by I think power hungry people becomes
it becomes exploited.
It becomes So they used to do work around the churches. Let's call it what do they call it when they are in nowadays they call them parishes.
I get what you're saying, where there's sort of like the garden where they eat their food from.
The back in the day, let's give it a name and say the Vatican of back in the day. Okay. So they were doing work around it, but they were very, very efficient. So when Pope Innocent becomes the Pope, Pope Innocent
was not that innocent.
Is not innocent at all. In fact, the name itself, I think, is just given for a man that evil. You can't have a name such as Innocent. You get me? Which reminds me of how now American corporations all over the world, not only American corporations, always have, they always give the most heinous of, they always have, what do they call that term? Where something is so bad, but you describe it in a pleasurable way. What do they call that? Of that. I know you're saying. It will come to us. It will come to me. It will come to me. Right now I'm blanking on so many things. So this Pope didn't like this color, the black color. But he recognized the efficiency.
But why didn't he like what was that based on?
I don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know what it was based on. But all I know is that they were so energetic, strong, and could work longer. Mm-hmm. And they worked in teams, and work given to the black people would get finished faster than the work given to the Asians. So it also comes during the time when they are discovering a lot of gold in South America. Okay. A lot of gold in South America, and the Spanish are digging a lot of gold, but they don't have the manpower. Mm. So the Pope suggests that they go over back to Africa, pick up more people, and send them to the mines to the benefit of amassing as much gold to lead back to Rome. So that's how this whole slavery thing started. And the Pope decreed that we'll stop using the Asians, the Indians, because we found people that are stronger and more efficient. So that's how it becomes a black thing. But before slavery was for...
I never knew this.
Anybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it started in South America and then moved to North America.
Yeah, started in South America.
Which I don't think many people know either. And I think a lot of people don't even know that there was slavery in South America. It's not really taught in schools.
Personally, I had to educate myself as well. Yeah. Because when you're in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda, growing up in Kawempe, you're just looking at soap operas. There was a time when soap operas from South America really became popular in Uganda. Maybe because they were cheaper to obtain and have a cheap broadcasting licensing
rights. Yeah.
So there were series like Wild Rose, and then like all of these people speaking Spanish, but it's dubbed over with English. And the women loved that because the romance, the stories.
Yeah, it's like over dramatic.
The
for
dramatic
me, my
slapping, the crying, and then people falling in. Yeah, all of that. So during that time, we watched so many of them, but none of us ever wondered. I didn't wonder about where all the black people, the representation.
Yeah, you just thought there weren't black people.
I just thought everybody in South America was Spanish looking. You get me? I assumed everybody looked European Spanish.
Right.
You get me? Or a mixture of that.
Yeah.
Brunette, speaks with an accent, and so that's what we thought it was. It wasn't until I came to the US that I read up so much on the bachata rhythm and how many people many people grew coffee, how many people grew sugar, and so many other wonderful traditions from Afro-Latinos,
right,
and their contribution to black history, that I was like, oh my God, Pele. And Pele is this football star, one of the best to ever play the game. But we all assumed, I don't know why he looks Ghanaian to me, actually. He looks more Ghanaian than Brazilian. But we never wondered why he was the only black man probably from South America that we knew. Until you discover that then again, colonialism is a fucked up thing, and European power and dominance, and wherever they find resources, they go to dig and steal and subject the people to basically, they dehumanize people.
Yeah.
And one of the other ways of dehumanizing people is showing them that their representation doesn't matter.
Right.
So there is a huge culture of black people in South America that so many Africans don't even know about. I pride myself in being a Pan-African, but it wasn't until I began reading about Marcus Garvey and his vision for Pan-Africanism being, ignore all of these stupid borders that were drawn for you, but begin looking at Africa through the eye. Look at Africa as every time you see a black man, that's Africa. Even the concept of it's a land, it's this, first forget that. Right. Every time you see a black man, that's Africa. Anybody that looks like you, that's Africa. Because he was looking for a way of bringing black people together to ignore the bullshit, to deal away with the divide and conquer problem in uniting Africans. Mm-hmm. So that's when I was like, he was talking about the people in Latin America. I'm like, hold up. There are people
You're like, who are these people?
Yeah, so I had to do a little education by myself. And we also went to a very wonderful museum. I think it was at UCLA, where they had a Afro-Latino exhibition, I think, at UCLA, which was really nice. And we're talking about all these women who were fighting for civil rights in South America. So you hear about the ones in America, but few people go deeper into even the story of the South Americans. And their struggle was even much earlier than the American story. So you look at art, you look at stolen gold, you look at the labor, and then you get to realize that, actually reparations are due or overdue, because most of the castles you see, most of the inventions you see that have been whitewashed through they invented this, the white person invented this. No, that was just the man that owned the farm where the slaves invented a way to make their work more.
And it's not just the things that slave labor built. It's what was taken away when you destroy a community and you make it not have the ability to build itself and grow and develop as it would have. I think that's really important to draw the connection. So seeing what happened with Europe throughout all these places over the years. And I think in the US, we see those who choose to see and choose not to see the clear distinction of the slave labor came over and literally built America. Like there was nothing in America.
Slave labor built the wealth of America.
Roads, buildings, the government offices, like literally everything. So there wouldn't even be anything without slave labor. So seeing that goes, those reparations need to be made. But also, as you're saying,
slave labor also built Europe.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think people don't think about it.
All of these beautiful gardens.
But that's what I'm saying. France, I think people think Europe is has a more ancient history than the U.S. Things were already developing, but it's like no, that they were the people exporting. U.S. Latin America were importing the labor. So everyone's guilty here, and everyone's guilty, and everyone destructed.
You look at the island nations where slaves were taken to grow sugarcane. That's the European doing, because they were smart in their evogeniousness that they did not want the slaves living where they did not want to see the slaves laboring. So they conquered places like Jamaica, where they used to grow their.
It's like isolated.
Yes, it's over there. I'm not seeing it. So I'm a civilized man.
Yeah, it's the same way they put different prisons on islands, or like.
Yeah, it's the same way. It's the same way Americans deal with war. It's happening over there, so it's not happening.
People can pretend they don't know about it.
So you pretend that the dehumanization of other people is not actually happening, or that because they are manufacturing the sneakers for me or the shoes for me, you kind of like, the sneaker looks good, so I love it. So you kids can keep stitching. Your underage kids can keep on working for the corporations.
So, okay, I don't know what you were going to say, but I was going to say that we've talked about the clear need for reparations in terms of things being taken and things need to be returned. But I wanted to then get back to this whole thing about humanitarian aid and nonprofit. Can we go in that direction now, or is there something else you wanted to say?
This is a perfect segue to get into that conversation, because usually when people are discussing reparations in America, they feel as if something is being taken away from them. If you feel that way, then you're not a fair person, because you're benefiting from advantages of building wealth on wealth on wealth, because we all know wealth builds more wealth.
Yes, and you're living off the infrastructure and systems
that were created by
on the backs of people
who have been denied that opportunity, and for generations and generations and generations. So the conversation of reparations is not aid. I think this is what you're telling me about.
So I just sort of had this realization.
So in terms of countries, it's not aid that you, the person who has amassed this much wealth, is now giving the poorer nations money. It's not aid. It's actually leveling the field because you're a civilized human being who recognizes.
Right. So what I'm trying to say here
equity,
is we have this attitude of, we see all these nonprofits and organizations that give relief like we mostly know about East Africa or Africa because that's where
I know Uganda.
You know Uganda.
You've worked in a non-profit sector.
Yeah, and I've worked in East Africa.
And I've lived there, and I see how it all plays out. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course you.
And
read
now
up
I know how the money is raised, having lived in America.
Yeah, you've
now
attended
I know.
fundraisers.
Yeah.
You know how it works.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of donating, of giving, because you're being charitable. When you go to work for a nonprofit like I did, it was like, I'm here to make the world a better place. I'm giving back. But it wasn't from the frame or mindset of, I've participated in a society that has stripped these places of what they had. Mm-hmm. And it's not a handout, it's not a donation. It's like paying back the reparation of what was taken. So even this idea of like, we see people get upset about the US or European countries giving a certain amount of funding. Yeah. Or just on the ground in Uganda and other countries of feeling like it's a donation, that's still the mentality because that's how it's presented. That's the PR around what is actually reparations, but is considered something else, like a helping hand.
It's called a helping hand. It's called aid. And we as Africans right now, our biggest battle is not that the people cannot provide for themselves, but there has been this aid, the aid mentality of expecting someone to always save you. Mm-hmm. And there's also the perception that because you come from Africa, you actually need help. You get me? Yeah. I even see sometimes the reaction of people when I tell them I'm not African American and I say I'm African. Yeah. They immediately shift the power dynamic to, oh, now you probably need help from me. Yeah, you get me? So it's the perception that these countries are rich, helping out the poor countries. Yet, if you look at it from the perspective of these are the countries that are actually rich, right?
From
that
stealing.
Have been overly exploited, right? Because you look at all the minerals, and all the minerals come from Africa. Most of the minerals come from Africa. Some others come from other places of the world, but those places have at least laws that protect people. Yeah. In Africa, they only have to cause a war and topple a government and take over all the resources.
Which is usually why
Africa does not manufacture guns, with the exception of South Africa. Mm-hmm. Africa does not manufacture Kalashnikovs. Those are Russian guns. Mm-hmm. Africa does not whenever Africans elect a democratic leader who is not going to be corrupt, and there are checks and balances, and it makes sense. Most of the times, a Western power funds a rebel group, right, and that person is often killed. Mm-hmm. And this is well documented, all through the Congo, Uganda, and name an African country that they now call a shithole country or banana republic. All of these things, all these things come from here, and books have been written, but and you look at the consequences of foreign policy or Western foreign policy in Africa, the years and years of disturbing the peace, right? To put it in ludicrous words, years and years of disturbing the peace and the people you've denied the opportunity to fend for themselves. Mm-hmm. Because if they're in refugee camps and you're raising money to feed them in a refugee camp, just know they ran away from their home and haven't been able to grow food for like 12 seasons. Right. You get me? It's the ribs of their children that they use to raise money to pay salaries of Western expatriates who now work for these organizations. Right. And then these people are still going to get just a little porridge here and there, 1 meal a day still, if they are lucky. And it has been the tradition of the American, the European, whoever is donating to most of these organizations, he's looking at poor kids on TV as they're fundraising. Give $1. There are flies on the face all over. Give $1, give this. They appeal to the empathy. The people giving the money are actually very empathetic. Yeah. But with that empathy also comes the the mindset is always shifted that every time they think of Africa, they think poverty, they think war, and a society that cannot fend for itself. And it so happens that you even hear this in the mouths of like politicians who you'd think know better.
Yeah, because it's not it's the idea of not being able to fend for oneself, or when it's like, no, you've taken away
from these people for years.
Yeah, you've created created the problem, and then you're living off of a cycle where a community has been destabilized and can't do its day to day, can't provide basic needs. So then you get to create a business that provides for that and employs people, and then governments, as that need declines.
This is water, by the way.
As the need declines,
I feel the need to defend myself every time I pour something in.
Now you're gonna have cold tea.
It's gonna be cold tea. Yeah.
But as the need declines in a community or a nation, then different politicians and leaders from all over the world get together and find ways. Okay, this refugee thing is profitable. These selling guns is profitable. So
poverty is profitable.
Yeah, it's very profitable. Yeah. So there's two pieces to that then, because it's kind of like, first of all, aid has to be reframed as reparations, but also because it's become a business, you then would it be a reparations business, which is also disturbing.
I like that a lot, but please proceed. I like your idea of rephrase the idea of aid to reparations. Yeah, basically, because that's fair. That takes away.
I think the people giving and the people receiving. Yeah. It would totally change the mentality and totally change the ethos of everything. Like,
yeah, it would completely change Africa's struggle now to rebrand itself.
Yeah, and to decolonize, because there's still like aid currently is kind of the neo-colonization. Yeah. And I feel bad because there's definitely organizations doing great work that's sustainable, that's more entrepreneurial based.
Yeah, I know a few.
And there's also, and there's also like, again, you can't say don't give disaster relief when a war starts, even though we know these wars are generally, is it called a proxy war when it's done for someone? Yeah. It's like done for someone else's agenda.
Yes.
So it's so complicated.
So you have to. It's a very complicated issue because if you do not donate to the people in the refugee camp, the help is not going to get to them. But then you also look at the countries and how much countries pay to the United Nations in order to run programs that are supposed to feed people in such situations. And you then ask that why do people then have to donate? So another way of looking at reparations, instead of looking at it as aid, is whether you like it or not, American, Chinese, wherever you are, there are materials that have been mined to bring you this luxury that you live in. And it has all come at a cost. Yeah. And whether it's a TV, whether it's a microwave, whether it's think about all the things that make your life comfortable.
Your phone,
your easy living life comfortable.
The phones that are attached to us now.
Your phones, your radio. There are materials in the world that are not mined from any other place except Africa. Yeah. So if you're using a microphone, you're using a radio, you're using a computer, that material has been funded by a war and people dying in the Congo. Or it has been funded through something nefarious. So we are all not guilty. We know that these things go on, but probably some people have not drawn the strings between the wars happening in Africa and how they end up with their beautiful phones, their cheap radio. Yeah. All of these things are connected.
This is also making me think about, like, again, when we're talking about leadership sort of being selected by Western nations, and it's done so that they can get favorable deals when they're continuing to pillage natural resources. Yes. I just lost my train of thought. Oh no, it's back, because I was like, so say somehow aid was reimagined as reparations, you'd still have the issue that the system is problematic, and you'd still have the issue that a lot of leaders would still
steal the money.
be corrupt.
Yes.
Because that's the system is the if a leader's already been bought, then no one's looking out to handle the corruption or doing accountability, because that's the leader that creates the global system that people are trying to build. So then what I'm saying, so if you have the issue with the leader, how do you get the reparations model working? But I do think that it would empower people on the ground, because I think if you feel like people are giving out aid, you're not trying to get that. But if people are giving out reparations, you feel entitled to that, and you're like, excuse me, give me my people are going to fight for that, because that's for everyone. That's not like, oh, I'm just currently a refugee, or oh, it's like, no, every person on the ground deserves something back.
And I think the best way to do reparations might not even be through the state, but most of these companies manufacturing these things, we need to look at where they get the minerals. You get me? Like if all your minerals are being mined out of a conflict place, and if you've been having diamonds and marketing diamonds for years, and it just ended with the campaign of calling them blood diamonds, but you kept all of the profit.
Yeah.
There should be reparations, because people died and societies were destroyed, but you just issued an apology on a paper and kept all of the money, and now you give the crumbs back because you're so generous. You get me?
Yeah.
So it should be corporations. It should be people that have profited, governments that have profited, and corporations that have profited from these places that they have destroyed. Yes, it's not aid, it's reparations.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like that's where I think we can just sort of end there. I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, it's how could things move forward? I mean, I guess as the conversation grows.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully more people will be. Hopefully there are a lot of like-minded people out there.
We hope so. We can only give people the ideas and the context and how we understand
there might be people
and how
talking
we've
about this.
Experienced it. Yeah. But I think you're the first person. I need to give you credit, because you're the first person who raised the idea and said, why do they call it aid instead of calling it reparations?
Yeah.
So you begin examining why you would even call it reparations, because to most people, reparations are for people in slavery. It's an American conversation most of the time, but it's a global conversation. Right now, you're making it a global conversation.
I'm sure there's people who've brought this up.
It is a global conversation.
Yeah, it is. I'm just
maybe
saying,
some
I'm not
people
taking
brought
credit.
it up.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know is that in my journey as a human, I've recently had an awakening to this through just different things that I've been reading and seeing.
Yeah. So should the art be returned?
Yeah, definitely.
Should the art's profits be? Should it be so the
Here's
art should be returned and the profits collected by the museums? Because
here's the thing.
The art was there.
I don't think that those museums should then go bankrupt. I mean, maybe there's a long-term payment plan. I don't know how
they shouldn't. But these museums are taxed. Let that tax then go back to the countries.
Instead of going to their own countries, the tax goes to the countries they're doing reparations.
Yes.
I think there's definitely ways.
Now let's look at the tax that they have been collecting.
I don't know if museums are taxed, because I think they're.
I don't know.
I think they're.
But
organizations.
if it's the National Museum and it's a government institution, then the government has been making money, and we can quantify.
The point is, we
can quantify this money.
If people think creatively, there's no shortage of ways to create reparations, which is the same way in the States. Like, people are like, oh, you can't take our money. It's like, okay, but there's a lot of land available. Yeah. Maybe it's giving land out to people. Like, there's different forms of reparations, of giving back to people.
Yeah, black people in America are the only people. Sorry,
it could
black
be
people
education.
In America are the only people who didn't get any land. Think
in
about
the
that.
U.S.
In the U.S., every other group that arrived through Ellis Island or whatever got land.
The Chinese, because they were also laborers and really have been historically treated terribly.
Yeah, I think part of San Francisco has a Chinatown. I could be wrong, but part of San Francisco has a Chinatown
is the land.
Because there is a land and a community that has been given. After the railway lines were constructed by the Chinese, and even after I think the Japanese internment camps, I think an effort was done to give some land to these groups.
Yeah,
it's only
a pretty
it's only
pathetic
black people
effort
in
anyways.
America who are not given land. And land is usually the first form of wealth. Actually, if you're going to grow any wealth, you grant people the land, grant them the tools.
Well, I was going to say, so I think like a good land is...
they can use their labor to
land is a good
land.
form of reparations. I think education, like maybe free education for a certain number of generations or something. Like, I think there's just a lot of great ways to do it. It's just the people don't want to.
They don't want to. They're not willing to. Some people are not even willing to have the conversation because African Americans, Native Americans don't pay taxes, right?
Right.
And that's the only thing. They have their land. They store their land and push them on reservations, but they don't pay taxes.
Yeah, so they have smaller land, much smaller, but
half a loaf is better than none. You still have some. This is very problematic. The issue. The world has not so many problems, man. But I believe in again the conversations that lead us there. Yeah. Because even to get to a place where you and I are sitting on the same table in this land has taken several fights and several conversations to even get to where it is. So we recognize that progress is possible. Definitely. And we only have to spark the thoughts and start conversations. Yeah. So let us know what you think in the comments about our discussion.
Should art be returned? Should aid be reparations? How do we change the systems of governments where people are receiving aid, where it's become so messed up? I don't know. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm Miriam Tamar.
I love this. And I'm GNL Zamba.
We're in Nsimbi. Thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to the next conversation.
Like, subscribe, share, join the discussion, and we love you. Peace and love. And see you for the midweek.